Well, good afternoon. It just turned 12 p.m. Wow, talking about starting on the dot. But welcome and thanks for joining us today for our new knowledge. My name is Sandy Ratliff. I'm with Virginia Community Capital, and we are tickled and happy to be part of this program in collaboration with the Washington County Chamber of Commerce, the Virginia Highlands Small Business Incubator, and the town of Abington. If you're not aware, and this is your first time, first of all, where have you been? We've been doing this for almost 10 years. It's hard to believe. But this is a program that we started in support of the Washington County Business Challenge, which we will have our 10th year starting in January for that event. And it was a way to help our business community that are starting and growing to continue receiving professional development. And no matter if you're new in the business or you've been around for a long time, we all need to build up our skills and learn more to be better professionals in the economy. Today's session is going to be recorded for education and training purposes. However, after the session, it will be available up on the Virginia Highlands Small Business Incubator's Facebook page. And it will also be on our YouTube channel, New Knowledge, where you can find probably 190 workshops that we've been doing over the past 10 years there that's available for you. As a way to keep the webinar flowing and to help our speaker today, we have everyone muted and their cameras off. However, this is a workshop or a webinar, and we want to hear from you. So if you have a question for our presenter, please post those in the Q&A section or in the chat, and we will respond to those and make sure that those questions get answered, because I know that Janice wants everyone to leave here with a greater knowledge of how they can turn properties into a rental. It's my pleasure today to welcome Janice Thayer with Curated Properties, LLC. Janice is also a Washington County Business Challenge participant and has a variety of short-term properties in the area, and is the perfect presenter today to share her knowledge and experience in running Airbnbs and other rental properties. So, Janice, thanks for joining us, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Sandy. I appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. I'm glad you've been able to take a little bit of time out of your day to join the presentation. What I'm going to cover today is what are short-term rentals and what's involved in opening one. It's going to be a big picture overview, and I'll drill down in some different areas. It really is intended to create questions, and please feel free to reach out to me. My email is listed there on the screen. It's also listed at the end of the presentation. Just to briefly introduce myself, I did participate in the Washington County Business Challenge in 2022, and I have been a business owner since 1996. I actually own 3 different businesses. Curated Properties is my newest. So Curated for me brings together a background from interior architecture and design, which I own Signature Environments that does all the designs for the properties, as well as business consulting. I work with small businesses to help them become more profitable and understand their expenses and how to grow. And so I'm going to go ahead and move on. Today, we're going to be covering just the history of bed and breakfasts and what the information needed to create a legal and safe short-term rental is. I always suggest being legal and developing relationships with your local officials. So we'll talk about that. Taxation and reporting. And there's Airbnb has become the generic name for short-term rentals, but there's other sites that actually you can list on and diversify your business. And then some general discussion of development costs and timelines. So historically, bed and breakfasts have been around for centuries, and it's people like myself letting others in our homes, and including places like roadside inns. So the tavern was a roadside inn back in the day, and they had rooms available where you could get a meal. And so did a lot of residents in this area and all over the world. So you'd add the cost of a meal in with your breakfast. And then in 2007, Brian Chesky, the founder of Airbnb, had moved to San Francisco after college, and he and a roommate saw that the market in San Francisco was completely oversaturated with and overbooked, and people could not find places to stay when they came in for conferences. So what they did is throw an air mattress down on their living room floor, and they, quotes, rented it out to visitors who couldn't find lodging, and they threw in breakfast and called it a B&B. They were so successful with doing that Brian reached out to a couple of former schoolmates, and they actually created the first official website for the business, which was airbedandbreakfast.com in August 2008, and got their first official bookings. They did so well that business has grown to be worldwide today. And the traditional bed and breakfast industry was disrupted by this new industry known as Airbnb, or short-term rentals, which I'll refer as STRs, throughout the presentation. In the chat, if you could, and Sandy, if either you or Nita could keep track, how many people have stayed in a bed and breakfast? And Sandy, I can't actually see the chat, so I may need you to share that with me.
I will let you know.
And then once you've answered that, oops, excuse me, I'm one too far forward. How many people have actually stayed in a short-term rental like an Airbnb? Okay, now I can't see the chat.
You've got several I haves on all of them.
Okay, okay, great. And then my next question is, based on, shoot, I can't change it. There we go. How many people would prefer to stay in either a bed and breakfast over a hotel? If you could answer one for yes or two for no, and Sandy will let me know. You seen responses?
Not yet. I guess they're typing.
Okay. All right, I'm going to continue on.
Yeah, we've got some.
Okay, great.
I just want to share that Emma White said, but the fees associated with short-term rentals always makes it more expensive option, even over a nice hotel.
It can at times. So, and we can swing back to that in the kind of toward the end. What I do want to touch on is, how did this industry grow so quickly? And really, it all comes down to money, ironically, Emma. The Airbnb site allowed anybody to turn a spare bedroom or floor in their home into extra money, and millions of people did. And as part of this whole disrupted economy, short-term rentals became part of the sharing economy, as did Uber and Lyft. And like we've heard in the news, and ride sharing has been largely unregulated, so we're short-term rentals, and that has been problematic. So if we jump forward to today, right now there are hundreds of thousands of short-term rentals around the United States in literally every market, from New York City down to the smallest towns in Virginia and anywhere else in the country. In Abingdon alone, there are over 200 plus short-term rentals. Around the world, there are millions of short-term rentals. And some of the cool things about that, to differentiate themselves in the industry, people have done things that are very unique. There are tree houses, there are container homes. A friend of mine has a railroad car that she has brought in and repurposed up in Lynchburg. And all of this growth and change has created a lot of supporting industries for the economy, which is amazing. And along with that, we've gotten more stringent regulations because of the lack of controls initially created a lot of problems. So I did a screenshot here from Google, and you can see there's over 1.2 million results on injuries and Airbnbs. I'm going to touch on that a fair amount today because it's something that's often overlooked, and that's one of the challenges. A lot of people who come from a background of not being in the commercial side of the industry don't realize that there are life safety codes and regulations. And so homeowners and investors jumped in without realizing those codes were there. Also, there was a lack of regulation on parties. Airbnb at the beginning did not have any rules related to it on their site. Now they do. But even still, there have been many deaths, shootings, there's high traffic in neighborhoods, or going to the short-term rentals, and a lot of neighbor complaints. So these are additional challenges. That has, of course, caused neighbors to ask for regulation of the short-term rental industry because it's gotten so overwhelming. And then big picture, there is so much market saturation with short-term rentals that there is now a problem with long-term affordable housing, especially in Abingdon. And this has created some big issues we'll talk about as well. And then there's certain markets that now have market saturation with short-term rentals, and it's affecting the occupancy rates of those rentals. And so any owner who bought in a high priced or a seasonal market at a high price are now having some issues being profitable. Currently in Abingdon, we have what's called a homestay ordinance, and that is how I permitted my short-term rentals. But there is a big change coming. So if people are looking at, and I saw Mayanna is included in this presentation, there's a big change coming with the zoning ordinance, and that affects all businesses in Abingdon as well as short-term rentals. And the upside is that it's created some very simplified zoning compared to what exists now. And going forward, the code or the ordinance changes a lot of the criteria that actually make it a little bit easier to develop a property. I put a link in there, and I don't know if you'll be able to actively use it, but you can copy it out. The draft version of that ordinance is listed there, and an updated draft is going to be available to the public in a few weeks, so you can watch for that as well. One of the questions that I had for the town is there a moratorium while we're waiting for this ordinance to be adopted? And there is not a moratorium at this time. However, Gabe, who works with the town, said that there are requirements to get a special use permit in the current zones B1, 2, and 3. And those largely follow Main Street and Highway 19. That is available on the town site already. So you can go look at it, but there's also a new zoning map that's coming out that really simplifies how the town is laid out. And I think that's going to help everyone a lot. As with pretty much everywhere, Abingdon has business licensing requirements, and that zoning ordinance does reflect that. So essentially anybody opening a business or short-term rental in town of Abingdon needs to be licensed. And a lot of people will say, well, this isn't really a business, but anytime you provide any type of service and there's an exchange of money, you are actually a business. And as a business owner, I would highly recommend being legal. Because there's so much liability in this industry, you'd hate to layer on another layer for yourself by not being a legal business on top of not following codes. So I put a link up at the top again. To getting a permit in Abingdon is really easy. You can see the business license screenshot there on the right-hand side. You can search the town for the forms and get the permit. And where I would start is you want to download the property verification business license. And that's kind of a pre-application form that you complete and you take into the finance department. And that's actually what starts the review process for any business you create, but especially short-term rentals. In the process, community development takes over, and that includes the planning department and zoning. And they are going to, in the future, be referencing the screenshots I've provided here of the new zoning district tables. And again, I mentioned these have been simplified down to the blue districts that run across the top of the tables. And so what they'll be looking for is the location that you are trying to permit allowed to have a home occupation? So I run both of my businesses out of my home, and I am a category A business. So the 3 businesses I have, 2 are under one heading, are all just me in my home. Then if I want to add an employee that I would like to have come to my home, it's going to change my type of home occupation. And you can see that becomes a type B. And you can see, as I've highlighted, that changes some of the locations where that can actually occur. And then, and also then you want to look too, is the proposed business in an area that's zoned for a short-term rental. One of the things that I personally like, and one of the reasons the zoning has been changed, you can see in the bottom table, I've highlighted short-term rental across the entire form. And there is essentially only 2 zones that are not allowed to have short-term rentals. So it really diversifies the areas that short-term rentals can be developed. And then whether you need a special use permit or not, right now, as I mentioned, that's zones B1, 2, and 3 do have to have a special use permit. But after the code is adopted, you can see per that table, it does not look like there's any special use permits required. And then once the building officials and community development are reviewing your application, they may both call you with questions and ask more about your business. I've listed here, this is just a screenshot of the town's website, but I've listed the 4 people who handle building development and business permits and zoning in the town of Abingdon. They're all wonderful to work with. I would suggest before you take their time that you spend time reading the new ordinance, and so you feel comfortable, and then give them a call to save them time in their busy schedules. Under the current homestay ordinance, which is going to be replaced by the new zoning ordinance, the building officials and the fire marshal would come and do an inspection. And in the United States, the International Building Code and Fire Code guide all life safety for residential and commercial properties. And it's really important to follow those things. And so in Abingdon, prior to the new ordinance, properties were inspected to make sure the proposed location was safe for nightly rentals. And so in my particular instance, the fire marshal and the building inspector came and they inspected the entire location, regardless of the area that the actual short-term rental was going to be in. So to give you an example of how that could play out for somebody, let's say you've invested or are going to invest in a 1-story building with an unfinished basement. And all the guests will be occupying is that main floor of the residence. You're still going to have the unfinished basement be inspected as part of the short-term rental because there could be things in the basement that make it unsafe to actually occupy the main floor. So the 2 officials will walk through, take a look at everything. They'll give you a list of corrections and leave those behind with you. And then you work on making the corrections, schedule your follow-up. Once you're approved and you've gotten all your corrections made, you'll actually have a fire prevention code permit issued to you, which is then placed in your short-term rental to show that it is a safe location. And I put a big red box up in the top because of my background in interior architecture. I would say, regardless of whether the new ordinance has a fire safety inspection or not, you need to know as the owner of the property or a host of a property that you'll always be liable for any life safety issues or injuries that occur on a property that you own or manage. And we live in a highly litigious society in the United States, and you can see from the screenshot that you can definitely be sued as an Airbnb host or even just letting property on your own. And even if somebody does it, let's say maliciously, it's not based in fact, you still have to defend yourself. And that's very costly for small businesses to do. So I would be very proactive if you can be, and head it off by being safe. And we'll talk about that next.
Janice, one quick question. So
Yes.
far, this is all town of Abington specific, not Washington County. Is that
No,
correct?
it's not Washington County at all. I have not touched on that right now. My understanding is Washington County does not require permits to have a short-term rental. And I don't know if that's going to change with Abingdon picking up their ordinance or not. All right. So for those who may be thinking of doing their short-term rental in their own home that they occupy, I know there's a number of people in town who actually rent their bedrooms or a couple of bedrooms out and bathrooms. Part of the safety for that, and just in your own home, is the things that the inspectors are looking for is no extension cords, only surge protectors. The reason for that is, let's say you have a brand new coffee maker or a really old coffee maker, and it has an electrical problem and starts on fire. The surge protector will actually break and not continue to help that fire grow. Also, you're not allowed to have power running under rugs or carpeting. It's another fire hazard. Fire extinguishers are required to be visible and centrally located to suppress fires. And you can see, this is a picture of one of my rentals. You can see the lovely fire extinguisher is front and center. And that's because as guests enter, they can see that every time they come and they go. So if there's something that happens in the unit, that they are actually able to self-suppress that fire if they're able to, and put it out before calling 911. And then smoke detectors are required as a life safety requirement by code. They're in bedrooms, they're in some general living areas. And then also there's just some basics like making sure that outlet covers are protecting any opening things that you and I might not notice, but the inspectors will be watching for is knockouts missing on electrical panels, or somebody can put something in there, or a junction panel or a junction box not being covered. And then once you do all of those things so that your property is safe, Airbnb has their own specific requirements that you'll want to be fluent in as well. So who's liable for injury in Airbnb? It comes down to the property owner. And liability as a business owner applies to everything, whether you own a small shop on Main Street or you have a short-term rental. So if you have a shop on Main Street, you have a cracked tile at your entry door and a piece breaks out and people keep catching their toe on it as they come into the shop. If somebody falls and breaks their teeth because they landed on their face, that liability falls on you because, quotes, not knowing a code or not fixing something you knew was broken or damaged isn't an excuse for negligence in the eyes of the law, especially if someone is injured, maimed for life, or dies. So you really want to be as proactive as possible to have a safe property. And there's some additional life safety protections that are highly recommended. If you think about visiting a hotel or a bed and breakfast or short-term rental, you're not familiar with that location like you are with your home. And a girlfriend of mine used to be a flight attendant, and she would joke that people check their brains when they check their bags. So when people go on vacation, they really kind of disconnect with paying attention to things that they're not familiar with. So highly recommended are carbon monoxide monitors. If you own properties that are multi-story or on a hillside where the hill drops away from some of the stories, you may want to provide exit ladders that can hang on a windowsill to get out safely. And then also correctly sized exiting egress. And exiting egress is something a lot of people aren't familiar with the term, but to give you a visual, let's say you own a home that has a basement that is has part of the basement underground, and you put a bedroom into a corner that does not have a window in it, and there is a door to access that bedroom. If a fire were to start outside that bedroom door and you had your children or guests in there, you have now created a fire trap. So any sleeping area per code is required to have exiting egress to exit the exterior without going through that primary door. So those are things to be aware of as well. Some recommendations I would have is hire or invite professionals out to come and evaluate your furnaces and your fireplaces and some of those other things so that you learn what's existing and what may need maintenance. And so you can be proactive and not have something that ends up releasing carbon monoxide. And a client I consulted with made a comment to me, well, I don't have any gas appliances in my house. However, people come to visit short-term rentals and you may allow them to park in your garage, but they flew in, they rented a car they're not familiar with, and it has a key fob where they can auto start the car. So let's say they parked in the garage, they closed the garage door, they brought all their stuff in, and somebody bumps the auto start on that fob and the car is running in the garage without anyone knowing it. And slowly carbon monoxide is leaking into the house. Well, carbon monoxide kills people. It's odorless, it's lighter than air. And so it's always good to have one of those monitors where somebody could do something like that and just head off any problems. And then also, I would highly recommend, and this is an industry recommendation overall, to invest in a separate short-term rental insurance policy that's separate from your homeowner's policy to protect your property in the event of incidents. And the incidents can even be things where there is damage that occurs in your property from guests vandalizing it, or accidental things where somebody moves your TV because they want to do something and they end up knocking the TV off and breaking it. Theoretically, they are supposed to pay for that, especially if they've come to you through Airbnb, but you may need to get that replaced faster than the Airbnb pays out. And then just a side note, the town of Abingdon does require proof insurance to be on file with them. So again, in the chat, if you could enter 1 for yes or 2 for no, if you currently own a business or have previously owned a business. And Sandy, if you could share those with me, please.
Will do.
Any responses?
Not yet.
Okay, I'm going to go on. Also, if you could respond or if you're interested, does anyone currently own a short-term rental? Or are you thinking about investing or creating a short-term rental? Again, 1 for yes and 2 for no. So, and I see we've got one response here. No.
One.
Okay.
Number one.
All right. So some things to think about if you are thinking about investing in a short-term rental, as whether it's in Abingdon or elsewhere. And if you're looking elsewhere, the requirements can be super stringent. So doing the groundwork in advance is pretty critical. There are jurisdictions right now, many of them, that require short-term licenses. And some of those jurisdictions actually no longer issue licenses to operate because of the lack of long-term housing has impacted their economy so specifically. And so that could create a situation where you need to wait for somebody else to sell their short-term rental for you to join the market legally. Also, researching what type of insurance and other requirements are required and how costly are those, so you factor for those. Understanding what could cause the loss of your short-term rental license, how hard is that to have happen? And then if you're looking at buying property in a development, whether it's a condominium complex or a housing development, checking on the homeowners association rules. There are some that have short-term rental and rental restrictions, even monthly restrictions. And even if they don't have them now, keeping in mind that homeowner association rules can change. And it has happened to some of the people in the mastery group that I belong to. And so you want to make sure that your investment cash flows as a long-term rental if you end up having to default into that because you lose your license or the ability to have a short-term rental changes. And then as with all businesses, and if you participate in the Washington County Business Challenge for 2023, there are always legal financial insurance things that you want to be fluent in and have coverage for. And one of the big reasons for that is you want to protect your personal assets and your business assets. And so highly recommended any type of business that you do or short-term rental is to find an attorney that's versed in the type of business that you're doing located in the state that you're in. So for instance, if you're thinking about buying short-term rentals in Florida, you'd want to hire a Florida attorney to help you understand the local area regulations, laws, and restrictions, as well as what type of entity that you would want to have for your business. And then also with all businesses, finding a CPA that works well with you for your business. And when you go into short-term rentals, it really is a very unusual industry. There's different ways of expensing things, of investing in properties, and finding a CPA who's fluent in that, owns their own short-term rentals, or has a number of short-term rental owners as clients would be somebody I would highly recommend working with. They will also assist you on developing your entity type or types. And there are situations where you may have multiple entities to protect yourself. They also will help you if you're starting a brand new business, advise on the business accounting method to use that's best for your industry. For instance, with my businesses, I have one that's a cash-based business and the other is an accrual-based business based on what I do in that business. And then both of these people, the attorney and the CPAs, are trusted advisors to you as you move forward with your businesses. So I would highly recommend being very big picture about what your goals are with your business so that not only this initial investment that you're wanting to make, but if you're planning on continuing down this road and making more purchases of property or more short-term rental developments, share all of that with them from the beginning because it may impact what they recommend that you start out with. And then the third trusted advisor to have in your group is your insurance broker, whether that's your home insurance broker or a commercial agent to help you have the correct coverages for your business. And as Sandy mentioned at the beginning of this, beginning of this year, I participated in the 2023 Washington County Business Challenge. Even though I've been a business owner for many years, you always learn things when you participate in things like the challenge. And I did. And I think it also helps you meet other people in your area that are planning on developing businesses and helps you create a network of people to support you. So I would highly recommend looking into that. It's 6 weeks, I think. Is that right, Sandy? 3 hours a night, once a week.
Actually, it's about 2 hours a night for 6 weeks, and that includes one night is your pitch contest. And you do have to submit a business plan, but all of that's going to help you as you move forward.
Definitely. So again, that's this very small investment of time. It's free to participate in it. And basically, you're getting a free education that can be really beneficial. So I highly recommend it. Some other factors we're going to talk about briefly: short-term rental taxation. So anytime that you are collecting income from anyone, you have to collect taxes. And in this case, Abingdon has a lodging tax that's required to be collected on all nightly rentals from 1 night to 90. And that lodging tax is 7% of the gross amount. And the gross amount includes your nightly rental total. So for instance, if you charge $200 a night for 3 nights, you have $600. You add the cleaning fee of, let's say, $150. So now you're at $750. And maybe you have a $150 pet fee. So now you're at $900. So you'll take 7% of the $900 has to be paid to the town. On top of that, the Commonwealth sales tax for the Abingdon area is 5.3% of your gross earnings for the Abingdon locations, and pretty much Washington County and our surrounds. And the way you report that income, if you list your property through Airbnb or VRBO, they actually withhold those taxes from the guest bookings and they pay them directly to the town and the Commonwealth for you. But monthly in the town of Abingdon, the STR owner or host needs to file a lodging report on any bookings that you did directly, meaning they came straight to your business and not through an online travel agency or OTA like Airbnb. And that report actually separates out what your gross sales are for direct sales, for direct bookings, and for the online travel agency booking. And you have to file that report monthly, even if, let's say, you had no business because it was a slow month and no visitors. And then owners are required to collect the direct booking taxes from their guests directly when they have those bookings and pay those to the town monthly and to the state on a monthly or quarterly basis. And if you're looking at locating elsewhere, you'll want to research what those requirements are for those locations. So some major factors to think about if you are contemplating investing in a short-term rental. The biggest one is, why am I doing this? You're really going to want to have a strong why before you jump into it, because there's a lot that goes into developing short-term rentals to do them well. And it's a highly competitive market now, as I said, with over 200 different businesses just in Abingdon, and that may creep into Damascus. There's 260 if you include parts of Damascus. So you're going to want to also think about location. Where is it and why? Your investment costs. What are some of the development factors, the timeline, and of course, marketing your business. So some location considerations are: do you already own the proposed location, or is this something you're going to end up purchasing? And then if you're purchasing it, is the market you want to invest in, even here in Abingdon, popular? Is it a blue label market somewhere like Myrtle Beach or Sevierville? Is it something that's a year-round market, or is it seasonal? Because those things will affect your cash flow. And if your cash flow is important, that's something you're going to want to know to cover your expenses. Also, understanding market saturation. There's some markets that are very saturated with short-term rentals and medium-term rentals, which is what the MTRs are. And so you'll want to know that in advance, especially if it's a cash flow factor for you. Sometimes even in a saturated market, there might be room for more short-term rentals, depending on what type of short-term rental you're developing. So let's say it's a market where there's a lot of 1 and 2 bedrooms, but there's no multi-bedroom homes. It might be worth doing that type of a development where large families could come and gather, or large groups of friends. So that could create a special niche for you. And then also, if it's important to your investment, will your investment pay for itself in varied market conditions? And when I say if it's important to you, some people buy second or third homes because they want to go there. They're going to go there, and it doesn't matter whether it cash flows or not for them. If they do rent it and they make a little extra money, that's great. That helps with some improvements or maintenance. And for other people, it is everything about what they're buying. So that's important to know. And then, of course, being unique in your market. So beyond being a 5 or 6 bedroom in an only small one to two bedroom market is a factor, but what are the design factors? What other things are going to be unique to stand out from your environment? And then general development considerations to think about when you're either your own home or property you already own or something you're investing in. Are there going to be renovations needed to that location? And how extensive are they? Are you able to do the work yourself, or do you have to hire people to do the work for you? And those, of course, have different costs associated with them and timelines. And then are there subcontractors available? A huge challenge right now in this area and around the country is everybody who does reasonable quality work is booked. So you may end up having to wait for them. And if you do the work yourself, your time is still money. And it may take you a lot longer to do the work than somebody who's a professional. So those are factors. If it's a home that you already own and you live in, and you're thinking of moving out or diversifying and having people rent rooms from you, do you need to do a refresh? Things like small repairs that weren't really relevant to you, but would really look bad to visiting guests. Do you need to do updates like new light fixtures or plumbing fixtures? Do you need to paint, change up your flooring? Are new appliances needed? Maybe it was a long-term rental property you had, you want to change into a short-term rental property. Those are all factors to consider. And then if it's in your home, is the location, like a bedroom, already updated and nicely and completely furnished? And what I'd say by that is sometimes we may have poor quality guest bedroom mattresses, but we actually need to have a much higher quality mattress or nicer bedding or a stronger bed frame for visiting guests. So there are things to think about as well. And then how does it look when people arrive at your location? Does the building exterior need work? Do you need to refresh your landscaping or your gardens? So those are factors, and those will impact your costs as well.
Janice, we've got a question. What website would you look at to find how saturated the market is for short-term rentals in your area?
There are a number of them, and I can talk to you offline. You can just do a little research. I'd even just do Airbnb, because you can do, so let's say you own a 3-bedroom house. You could go on to Airbnb and search for, say, 6 guests and the criteria that you have in your residence or what your investment is, and search for those same things. So do some of the places have hot tubs? Do you have a hot tub? That'd be the easiest way to do a market evaluation, just look at what's on the market and what's not.
Yeah, I have found that the Airbnb website's very robust, and that to me is a good suggestion, because that's where I would go to look and do my research.
Yep. And there are businesses, as I mentioned, the short-term industry has spun a lot of supporting industries out. And so if you're really thinking of investing, there are businesses, and those I could talk to you about offline, that specialize in finding locations that are not yet saturated that you could invest in. But they're places you also want to, have a little heart. Is that someplace you'd actually want to go and visit yourself? And why are you investing? Is it straight up a money thing? And I would also be very cautious. You'll see postings on Facebook and on Instagram. Oh, here's the new hottest market. Be really careful about following that kind of stuff, and be really objective if you do decide to invest. Timeline is a big thing. And even for me, and I'm in the industry, a rule of thumb is everything takes way longer than you think. And so some factors that I would throw out are take the time that it takes to actually find a property to invest in, purchase it, close on it, then renovate it or refresh it is a big factor. Also, the time to find or upcycle older furnishings and select or purchase new furnishings. New furnishings may or may not be in stock and have lead times, so factoring for those. Purchasing all the things that it takes to complete your short-term rental, and literally there are hundreds. It's mind-boggling. Once you buy all those things, just think of the bedding. You have to wash it all, fold it, store it. You have to have storage on your site for all of those things as backups when you do a turnover from one guest to another guest. You have to have storage for all of your cleaning supplies and the extra linens and backup dishes and your cleaning supplies. Also, another factor that people don't think about is how much time is it going to take me to clean up this house or site after I've refreshed, and then before I start placing items, because that can be a big time factor too. You'll want to go top to bottom and be very thorough. And then you have the time factors of new furnishings have to be assembled. You have to install the furniture that you bought that's not assembled, that's already assembled, but has to be brought in. All of that takes a lot more time than most people think. And then are you going to do all of that? Can you do it all by yourself, or do you have to hire help, and is help available? And some additional considerations on budget and cost. There are so many furnishings and fittings that go into a short-term rental. It itself is a huge topic. There's a lot of line items. Even if you just think of one living room, and I've attached a little spreadsheet example up above, just a living room, when you start thinking about all the pieces, there's a sofa, there's some lounge chairs, there's ottomans, there's end tables and light fixtures. So things like that. And then are you going to reuse some of your existing furnishings that you may already own? And are they in great condition? Or are you going to use something where a guest is going to be sitting on a broken down flea market couch? You can look through some of the rentals and Airbnbs in Abingdon, and you will see some furnishings that look like they should have been thrown out 20 years ago. So how does that appeal to the market? It may not matter to some people. Cost may be a bigger factor, but those are things to consider. And if you're going to buy new furnishings, are you going to buy contract grade furnishings? For some of those, contract grade holds up better to guest use and abuse. Or are you going to upcycle furnishings that you can find that are high quality but have been used? Do you need to upholster those? Do you need to clean up the finishes or refinish them? And then depending on where you're locating, but even if it's a bedroom in a home, you need to outfit the kitchen or kitchenette. And this is just one of the many rooms, but there's a lot of things that go into just that one function. So having flatware, dishware, glassware, a coffee maker or coffee makers, and it goes on and on from there. So once you start to line out those items, you can just to get an idea of how your costs start to escalate. Of course, these are short-term rentals, and so being comfortable within the bed is a huge factor. So investing in great mattresses and strong bed frames. So you want bed frames that are going to hold up to the things that people do in beds. Having natural soft bedding, duvets, duvet covers, sheet sets, and blankets. And then you have pillows and pillow protectors and mattress protectors for bed bugs and moisture. Also, when you start to outfit bathrooms, obviously you have towels in multiples and throw rugs, all of those factors. Consumables like your paper towels, toilet paper, not only do you need to have storage for them, but you have to invest in them. And that's a significant cost, along with cleaning supplies. And then things like artwork or decorative wall items, table lamps, the things that actually make an Airbnb feel much more like a home away from home. And there's so much more that goes into it. But those are some big picture things to think about. And then where to list a short-term rental. Obviously, there's Airbnb, since the industry has the nickname Airbnb. There's also VRBO, which is vacation rentals by owner. Those are for entire homes. Booking.com is not only hotel rooms, but they also do short-term rentals. And then there are specialty niches in the market. And there are actually people who specialize in helping people in the military and government book short-term rentals. Well, like if you're a military family, you're moving from one location to another. There's a transition period maybe before you buy your own home or before you can move into a rental. They need to be accommodated. So that's a special niche. And then there's some other niches like travel nurses and traveling executives that might do mid-term stays. So they may stay weeks or a month or months. And those can be found on Furnish Finder and also Zillow.com. And then, as with everything, there are still more industry disruptions that are occurring right now. And some big ones are, there are large investment companies that are buying up local property management companies that have multiple short-term owner contracts, and they're purchasing all of those contracts from those management companies and buying the management companies. Also, there's investors that are turning old buildings, old motels and hotels into short-term rentals. Brinkwater in Damascus is one of the examples of a hotel that's actually short-term rentals. You just rent them by the night. I don't believe they even have a front desk. Or there's also happening in Abingdon, conversion of the old jail on Park Street and the Mercantile building into boutique hotels or motels. And then there's another change, like if you focus in being a host or a co-host and managing properties or managing your own properties, there's huge property managers that are now coming in like Vacasa and Evolve that could be competitors to you because they quotes are saving owners money on their co-hosting or property manager fees. But a lot of people's experiences as a guest is that it's very poor, that they do not provide the same level of quality that a true owner of that short-term rental would provide because it's actually their property. And then, of course, the hotel chains have also been affected by the market share loss to short-term rentals, and they're now creating their own short-term rental portfolios too. And then there's small investors like myself that are joining investment groups and pooling money, or families that are creating their own investment groups and buying properties, multiple properties, sometimes multiple properties across the country. So those are all things to think about in the ways that the industry is disrupted, but also the way that you could jump into it. And I totally appreciate your time. Curated Properties is completely based in creating distinctive guest stay experiences. If you have questions or you would like consulting, please reach out to me. I'd love it if you'd follow us on Instagram or on Facebook. And you can actually see our listings. They're linked in both of those places in our bios. So you could look at our Airbnbs on there. And we're doing our own direct booking site, but that's not up yet. That's all I have, other than answering questions.
Thanks, Janice. Appreciate it. If you have questions, post those in the Q&A, please. But I have a couple while we're waiting. One about promoting your properties. And I've had other owners tell me this. It's extremely important when you're giving the description, like your location, is to drop the names of some of your big tourist destinations. For example, here in Southwest Virginia, in the Abington area, we've got the Bristol Raceway. We have Rhythm and Roots. We have the Highlands Festival. We have the sports complex in Abington. And then I would definitely include the new Bristol Casino because they are burning it up and they don't have lodging available yet. And it'll be a couple years before they get that. So be sure you're not leaving something out that can help you to grow your business. And if you're an have existing properties, I would suggest you go and look. And if you've not done that, add that because that will absolutely help you. You know, if you're in the Coalfields area, I would include, the Spearhead Trails or some of the other outdoor recreation, the Clinch River. Just look around and take advantage of those opportunities to share. And one of the things I wanted to ask you is, since you've been doing this for a couple of days, managing properties, what would you say are the 2 to 3 biggest challenges for you in operating your short-term rentals?
Some of the biggest challenges are understanding who your guests are. So who are you trying to appeal to and how are you going to appeal to them? So my property has some specific limitations and some specific benefits. So the Nest property is specifically designed to appeal to couples. It's very large. It's over 1,000 square feet, but it's designed to be really intimate. And I can also house nurses there, travel nurses. So it has all the amenities that you would actually need to stay a month or months. But those same things allow couples to come and nest while they stay there. And they can split. A lot of my guests have said, this is perfect. We come on a budget. We're willing to invest in the space. It's nice. We can actually make a meal here if we want to make a meal here, or we can go out and eat, or we can warm up leftovers from a meal. So that's something, really understand who your market is and who you're trying to attract when you start to develop your rental. Some of the other challenges are cost. It's a huge investment. I don't think most people, even myself, and I come from the interior architecture industry where I'm used to buying furniture, fabrics, all of the things. But typically when I work with a client, I'm not outfitting them down to the gnat's eyebrow, and short-term rentals get outfitted down to the gnat's eyebrow. And third, it just takes a lot of energy to do it. One of the things I would recommend is that you clean your own short-term rental before you hire a cleaning team, so you know exactly what it takes to do that, what the ins and outs are, and how to keep it really clean. I see we have some questions. And definitely, Jean, yes, I recommend a professional photographer takes pictures of your short-term rental. That is highly critical. Or if you are a great photographer, you can use your own, but definitely professional. And then talk about the negative reviews. I would always thank the person for giving you feedback. And there's a lot of messaging that goes out behind the scenes. I have messages that I send to my guests asking them for reviews at the end of their stay. And I specifically ask them to let me know offline if they have feedback or if they've had a complaint. But I check in with my guests within the first couple of hours of their arrival, and then the morning after they've spent the first night, to make sure that they haven't had any problems. Let's say the internet hasn't gone down on them. Make sure that they slept well, the bed was comfortable. I always check in because I think that that's critical. That's why I'm a host. And so I would always thank them for feedback that they've given you, and let somebody know, let's say they had a complaint. Oh, I really appreciate that. I'm going to put your feedback into play immediately and try to get that resolved in the next 2 weeks. Thank you for pointing it out. I hope you come back and try it again, and I'll give you feedback that I've gotten that done. And then I do always ask for referrals. My whole business is actually focused on direct bookings versus being reliant on online travel agencies like Airbnb. And I do try to get guests' addresses. Sometimes people don't want to share those. I always give my business card, and I always get their phone number so that people are able to reach out to me directly. I do offer a special offer for return guests that book direct, and it saves them off of Airbnb. It saves them 15%, which is a lot of money. So that's.
Well, there was a couple of things I wanted to suggest. If you are just looking into getting into Airbnb properties, there's a great website that can help you kind of get an idea of rates and what's happening in the industry or in that area. And one that I have used is airdna.co that can give some good information. And also, if you're getting into this, wherever you're locating at, I recommend that you go and check with either the circuit court clerk or the Department of Taxation in that county, town, or city to make sure that you're covering everything. The worst thing you want to do is to get started and halfway into it, and oh gosh, you can't do that. For example, Abington, unless they've changed, they have a limit to how long someone can be considered a short-term stay client. And in other areas, it really doesn't do that. So those some of those details that you need to find out for your business.
Mm-hmm.
I know that affects folks like nurses, traveling nurses. I stayed at an Airbnb in Allegheny County in Clifton Forge a couple of years ago, and a lot of that rooms were rented out to nurses, but they could only have it for a certain amount of time, and then they'd have to put them back in the system as a new client. So you need to check those details for sure. And one other thing I want to ask you in regards to keeping track or to help people get into your properties, do you use any of the electronic locks where you can give them a temporary code and you can control that from your smartphone? Or
Yes.
I highly recommend that. And a friend of mine that's had Airbnb properties up in West Virginia said that on the outside of the door, no electronic devices or surveillance equipment on the inside, but on the outside, he did have something out there that he could know when they arrived. And he also had these things you put on lamps and so forth, or even on a radio, and that he could program those remotely to come on or a certain amount of time. So they know they're arriving late arrival. They're not coming until 9. He could turn a couple lights on and have that ready for him, just to give that little extra thing, and you can keep control over.
Yep. There's also some technology called Noise Aware and Minute that monitors, not with, it doesn't physically listen or videotape within the space, but it does monitor for moisture, noise levels, things like that. And you can set it up where it actually texts the guests, hey, you guys are getting too loud, please. It's 10 o'clock, please, nicely worded. If you could please keep it down. We don't want to disturb the neighbors. And then it escalates to the next level if you have to do it again. And hopefully you never have to call the police, but it does get to it. you've now broken the terms of our agreement, and so on and so forth. But those are great pieces of technology. There is a lot of technology out there on every level. Like AirDNA is great, as you mentioned, for assessing locations. There's dynamic pricing software that's available to help you make sure that your prices are variable with the market and not a static. So let's say you have one of the race weekends coming up and you typically list at $100 a night. Well, race weekend, you don't want to list at $100 a night. People are paying a lot more than that. So being aware of those events and investing in software and spending the time is also something to be keep abreast of.
Yeah, and another friend of mine that has properties suggested that when you review and kind of check out whoever is wanting to rent your location, because some red flags, for example, if it's someone that lives in your own town, make sure that they're over 18 or they're adults, because they've told me about a story of someone up in the Allegheny and that area of Virginia that had a tiny house, and they didn't do that, and they rented the properties. And this was the graduation week for the college up there, and they had you cannot get 50 adults into a tiny house with the floor be able to make, and they did lots of damages. So if you don't think that it's correct, you might want to do some checking with, even if you have to text them back and forth to find out more details, but it'll save you in the long run by just, if it's too good, what's that? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Well, I have it actually in my house rules that my guests have to be 25 years or older, and there's a number they have to agree to and follow the house rules. And so there's some relationships that you can build there right in the different platforms. But yeah, I don't rent to local people. If somebody local actually wants to reach out, because let's say their house burned down and they need accommodations, they can reach out to me specifically and we can work that out. But otherwise, I don't rent to locals. And you can see that in the different profiles for people online. And I also don't rent to people who don't have previous reviews from other hosts.
Good. And one other thing is, if you're going to let it be pet friendly, let it know up front, or if not, be sure you put that in there. And if you have no smoking, be sure you have all of that laid out. If you don't have it, people are going to go ahead and do it. So you better be prepared at the beginning.
Exactly.
Nita, do you have anything to add? I don't.
Well, I'm trying to get on here.
Nope, you're good.
I'm not able. Can you hear me?
Yes,
I can hear you. We don't see you live, but that's okay.
Okay. This was a great presentation. Thank you. I was not aware of everything that goes into becoming an Airbnb. So thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you guys for inviting me. I really appreciate it. And I see one other question. Do I require a refundable deposit for damages? When I do direct bookings, I do. And this is something I would caution people on who already have their short-term rental on Airbnb. Airbnb has something called Air Cover, and it gives the hosts the feeling that they are protected if there were to be damage that occurs in their property. But I do belong to a mastery group, and I can tell you that there are times that there are very clear damages that were done by the guests, because the group I'm part of, we all document our properties before the guest arrives. And you can prove that your property did not have this damage. Airbnb doesn't necessarily cover it. So that's why I mentioned that insurance repeatedly. There's some specific insurances that you can get and or have a damage deposit or a waiver that somebody pays you X amount of money to cover accidental damages, but not negligence. That would escalate up the food chain in terms of insurance.
And if you're in an HMO environment, you need to make sure that they approve of that. And you have for example, if there's only a certain amount of parking for that property, for example, if it's a townhouse complex, they may only have 2 parking spaces, depends on how it's laid out. So you need to have that laid out. But Janice, this was great. Thank you so much for sharing your time and expertise. This is the only way we could do these programs, is to have folks like yourself that share with our folks and help them learn their lessons. We all get our hand smacks occasionally, but if we can have somebody else like yourself that can share and tell us what to look out for, that means a whole lot. And for everybody that joined us, thanks for joining us. I know everybody has a busy schedule, but I know, as I did, you got a lot out of it. And wanted to remind you that our next new knowledge session will be coming up on November the 16th, and it will focus on how to use social media to promote your business. And Chad Thompson with the Town of Abington and Tourism Office will lead that session. And just a reminder, this session will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, New Knowledge, that you can view, and as well as the Facebook page for the Virginia Highlands Small Business Incubator. Again, thanks for joining us. If we can do anything, please let us know, and we hope everybody has a great day, and
Thank you.
stay well.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day.